It's a big deal to me if you don't know. Now you know I'ma change your life. Just put your hands in the air.
What's up, Kansas City? I'm Serenity. Today we have poet Glenn North here to interview with us. How you doing, Glenn?
I'm doing real good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
So, Glenn, tell us, for people who don't know, how did you get into poetry? I know you've been doing poetry for a while in Kansas City, so tell us about that.
When I was 8 years old, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. Both of my parents worked. She gave me a copy of a poem called If by Rudyard Kipling for my 8th birthday, which really kind of upset me at first because she, at other times would give me whatever the hot toy was or clothes and things like that. And so for her to give me this poem and that was it, I was kind of like, what's up with that, But she challenged me to memorize the poem and to live out its philosophy. And I won't do the whole poem, but like the first couple of lines are, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And it goes on and on and on and talks about what it means to be a man, actually.
I've heard bits and pieces.
Yeah, sure. It's a popular poem, but for an 8-year-old, at the time I didn't fully understand the philosophy that was being communicated in the poem, but I liked the rhyme and the rhythm and the fact that I was able to memorize it and recite it back to my grandmother gave me this real sense of accomplishment. And so shortly after that, I started writing my own poems, and it was always something that I enjoyed doing, but it wasn't until I moved to DC, lived in the DC area from like 93 to 97, and that's where I got introduced to spoken word and performance poetry. And there was a whole scene there, and it was really exciting to me. And I moved back to Kansas City in 97, and there weren't any venues like that. And I was talking to a friend and telling him how much I missed the scene in DC, and he was like, why don't you start something here? That was around the same time the revitalization efforts were taking place here on 18th and Vine with the Negro League Baseball Museum and the American Jazz Museum, and it felt like 18th and Vine, this area, would be a great place to try to find a spot. So we started at this little club called the Mardi Gras on 19th and Vine back in 97, and it just kind of took off from there. People started asking me to do performances at different places. People started asking me to do workshops for young people. And eventually I said, well, maybe I need to take myself seriously as a poet, and so here we are.
So as far as working with young people, you also work with Louder Than a Bomb. Tell us about your involvement with that.
Well, I had originally been coaching area youth and taking them to this national poetry festival called Brave New Voices. So I'd kind of been, doing that work. And then I found out about this organization in Chicago, Young Chicago Authors, that sponsored this citywide youth poetry festival. And and so it was comprised of all of these different high schools. And the title of the festival is taken from a line from a Public Enemy song. And the idea is that the collective voices of our youth can be louder than a bomb. A lot of the students who were involved in the program in Chicago, still having those issues with youth violence. And so the organizers felt like this would be a good way to deal with that, a creative outlet for Chicago youth. 2010 they did a documentary because the festival had been so successful. I saw that documentary and thought that would be awesome for Kansas City. And selfishly, rather than me going around cherry picking these kids to comprise a team, if we had citywide buy-in, then that would help me in terms of having a team ready to go to the National Brave New Voices event. And so when I reached out to Young Chicago Authors, it turns out that they were in the process of packaging the program giving people a toolkit, if you will, to figure out how to implement Louder Than a Bomb in other cities around the country. Met a guy who was thinking the same thing, a guy named Paul Richardson over, he was a teacher at the time at Washington High School. And so we worked together, went to Chicago, went through some training to kind of learn how to implement the festival. And so we started doing that 3 years ago. And it's been successful.
Oh, so maybe 3 years?
Yeah, this will be the third year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we move into 2016, that'll be the third year that the
I don't
festival
know why I
is
thought
taking
it was
place.
been around longer than that.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, time goes fast. But I think because there's a youth poetry scene in Kansas City,
Yes, so youth
that it
poets
might
are,
feel
yes.
like, yeah, that it's been around a lot longer than it has been. But yeah, so I've just, over the years, seen up close and personal the impact that creative expression in general, but poetry specifically, can have on young people. It gives them a voice, and ultimately, in the Louder Than a Bomb philosophy, it's certainly been my personal hope that when students talk about these issues, social justice, police brutality, violence in our community, that wakes them up and gets them excited about doing something, becoming change agents in the community. And so that work is very important to me.
When does the Louder Than a Bomb season start for 2016?
Well, it starts at the beginning of the school year. I should have brought a calendar so I could give you specific dates. I know that the finals will be in April. The exact date escapes me. But generally, in March, we'll start with, I think the first year we had 14 teams. Last year we had probably around 20. And we're looking at about 20 teams this year. But we try to engage with the teachers early in the school year so that they can start building the team. Ideally, it takes time to get there. We're operating with the support of various organizations, but not necessarily a huge cash flow.
Right.
If we had the money, we would have people like you, other teaching artists in the community to go into the schools and actually do the curriculum and help coach the teams. Right now, we've not been able to do that, but the incredible thing that has happened is that these teachers have stepped up to take on the role of coach in the various schools. So we start at the beginning of the school year. The festival kicks off in March, and there are generally 4 quarter-final bouts that take place over the course of a couple of weeks. Then we'll have 2 semifinal bouts. And then the final 4 takes place ultimately either at the end of March or early in April, depending on when Easter falls and spring break and all of that kind of stuff. And whoever wins the festival, the team that wins the festival, will then go on to the Brave New Voices Poetry Festival. That's international now, an international poetry festival for young people.
Didn't Paseo go last year?
Yeah, Paseo's kind of been building a dynasty.
Yeah, I know.
yeah. But so what is interesting is that I think some people will be gunning for Paseo this year. So it'll be, and it's all the competition is secondary. Obviously, the teams want to perform well, but one of the things that we communicate is that the points are not the point. The point is poetry. I mean, it's so subjective when you're ascribing points to a poetry performance, but there's something about competition. There's something about slam poetry that generates a different level of excitement for the audience. It oftentimes will make the poet push a little bit harder because he or she knows that they're going to be in a competition. But that's not the thing. The thing is, like I said, helping young people raise their level of self-esteem, understand the power of their voices, and to ultimately become involved in their respective communities and doing things that are positive.
So as far as your history in Kansas City and poetry, you are also part of a collective of, not just Kansas City, but international elite. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're doing with the Black Collective, and then you're also a
Kavikanam?
Yes.
Kavikanam was an organization that actually started in the mid-90s, and what the founders, Toy Dericote and Cornelius Eady, who are phenomenal poets in their own right, began to confront, because they teach poetry in academic settings, that there was a complication of there were several things that were going on that when you talk about the canon, when you talk about the work that's actually studied in
and I didn't know, sorry,
that's
I
okay.
didn't know when Natasha came in and interviewed, she said that there was 5 members of that live right here in Kansas City.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I knew you were, and then she was, but I didn't know there was 5. That's always like, that's phenomenal, and a lot of people should know that that is the case, because sometimes Kansas City gets overlooked.
That's right.
As far as our poetry community.
Yeah. So the fact that there are 5 Cobby Condom fellows that are living in the metropolitan area, I think says a lot for what's going on here in Kansas City. But it started because when we're in college and we're studying poetry, there's Walt Whitman, Shakespeare. The cliche is a lot of dead white men, right?
Right.
And so why are we not studying Langston Hughes? Why are we not
Right,
studying
sure.
Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, Amiri Baraka? So that was one of the things they wanted to address. The other thing is there's been a proliferation of MFA programs, and pursuing a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry opens a lot of doors for you, whether we're talking about publishing or teaching, at the university level. And so the way that the MFA programs are set up, a lot of the work is done in workshops. And so, just in just about every other area of life, there's not as many black people represented, in these different MFA programs. So what happens is when you're presenting a poem in a workshop setting, not a lot of people are able to relate to the messages that you are communicating in your poetry, or you get into these conversations about why did you use the N-word, or why did you use certain terminology that is particular to the black vernacular. White students there's a disconnect. So looking at those things, Toy and Cornelius said, let's start an organization that will be kind of like a safe space for emerging African American poets, and let's use our connections so that we can get in a faculty that will help, in terms of helping these poets understand what they'll be up against if they're moving into academia, or just helping them with their work, period, from a place of understanding and being able to relate. And so they put together, some of the people I mentioned that have been on faculty have been people like Amiri Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, Nikki Giovanni at one point, Lucille Clifton. Some of the greatest writers of poetry in this age would be the faculty at these retreats that you get to go to. And once you get accepted, and it takes a while. It was several attempts before I got accepted, but that time spent at the retreat, they have it every summer in June. It's a very condensed amount of time, but so much knowledge is conveyed. And then the other people who are fellows, the woman Robin Lacoste, oh gosh, I'm forgetting her last name, I'm spacing, Lewis, just won the National Book Award for Poetry, and she was the Cobby Condom Fellow when I started back in 2009. And there are so many. Natasha Trethewey, who was on faculty a couple of years ago, was the Poet Laureate of the United States, which is really like the highest office that you can achieve. So it puts you also, not to go on and on, but in the circle of people that you can touch and communicate with and connect with, that provide a support system as well. So it's just a great thing. And I was just talking to Natasha earlier, the fact that several of us are represented here, we do want to do more in terms of encouraging other poets in Kansas City to apply, and kind of helping them understand that process, so that maybe the next time I come on the show, it'll be 10 Cobby Condom fellows from Kansas City. Yeah.
So you recently came out with your first book in October. Can you?
Yeah.
You got it.
Yes, I do. And so it's interesting here. I'm sorry. Yeah, I gotta learn this whole self-promotion thing.
Right.
Shameless plug.
Right. I'm like,
But just for years was waiting for the perfect moment. You know, we can oftentimes be our own worst critics. And although I've been doing this work all my life, I just always felt like, well, it's not quite there yet. And so, thank goodness, the folks at Prose, shout out to Jeanette Powers and Will Leatham and all of the people that came together to put together this pop poetry series. And the idea was to publish 12 local poets in 12 months. And they worked together with Spartan Press and reached out to this first wave because it just started this year. And I happened to be one of the people that they selected. And I said, well, you know, it must be the right time. And so rather than second guessing myself, I just kind of went through my catalog, and the themes that seemed to keep reoccurring obviously dealt with black culture. And you know, I served as the poet in residence for the American Jazz Museum for 10 years. So jazz music has definitely been an influence. And so the title of the book is City of Song, and you know, kind of a take on this, you know, incredible jazz tradition that Kansas City has. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. Now I got to figure out how to get it out of my hands into other folks' hands. Yeah.
So how would somebody get in contact with you if they wanted to get a copy of the book or book you or anything like that?
Well, you know, we were having this conversation earlier.
I'll send you a smoke signal. Hope you respond. Send an email, hope you respond.
Yeah, right? I know. I'm an analog man living in a digital world. I really have to step my game up. Right now, I mean, it's Glenn North on Facebook. My email address, you know, is Glenn A. North, and that's Glenn with 2 N's, at yahoo.com. And it's available at Prospero's. I've got a couple of people now that are helping me to develop a website and a PayPal account and all of that, so that I can do some e-commerce and promote the book. And they're trying to help me step up my game with social media and all of those things. But right now I'm kind of master P-ing it. So the trunk of my car, if you see me out, you know, I generally have a few copies with me. But yeah, Glenn North on Facebook, or Glenn A. North at yahoo.com.
Well, thank you for your time, Glenn.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Serenity, reminding you to spit your piece, and make sure you check out whatsupkansascity.net, and make sure you get a copy of this book because I know it's phenomenal. All right.
I'm IFBB Bikini Pro Cat Williams, and when I'm not working out in the gym, I'm searching the web on Cascade Media and What's Up Kansas City. So make sure you check them out.